Welcome to the Revolution, and welcome to Revolution Television. My name is Lawrence Hebron. The goal of Revolution Television is to discuss a lot of those national issues you hear the other guys talking about on the other talk shows, but to take it to a higher level, to take it a step beyond, to consider some of those issues that they don't or won't talk about. Well, today, our guests include Gregory Young. Gregory's been involved with local establishment politics for a number of years. He's served in a variety of capacities, including as a campaign manager and as a district representative for a member of the House of Representatives. So Gregory, thank you for being with us today.
Pleasure to be here.
Scott Folkens. Scott has been involved in local establishment politics also in a variety of capacities. He has also been a candidate for the House of Representatives, so we're grateful to have you here with your expertise. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you for having me.
And Tony Burr. Tony has been involved with politics also, but not in such an establishment capacity. He is, in fact, was most recently served as a senior staff member of a non-establishment candidate for the governor of the state of California. So Tony, thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, our program is in two major sections. The first section is called the yes-no, and the second section is called the hot button. I'm going to explain the yes-no to begin with, and we'll discuss the hot button, how that works later on. As you know, and if you've listened to a lot of other political commentaries, and if you're listening to this, you probably have, one of the major problems that they have is trying to get the guest to answer a question, to give them a straight answer. And then once they do give an answer, oftentimes an argument erupts and everybody's shouting over everybody else. You can't even hear what's going on. So we're trying to avoid those problems with our show. In the yes-no, we will take a matter of national importance and we'll try to boil it down to a question that can be answered with either yes or no. Like, do you support this? Do you feel this way? Yes or no. We then turn that over to our guests. The first word out of their mouth must be either the word yes or no. If they don't, then I've got my faithful K-bar here, and we're going to enforce that. They will have to answer yes or no. Now, we realize that a lot of times the answer to these questions is not a simple yes or no. It's yes, but, or no, however. And so we give them one uninterrupted minute to explain their answer. After Gregory goes, then we'll go to Scott. He'll have his opportunity to give yes, no in one uninterrupted minute, and then we'll do that with Tony. After that, we go to round two. Round two is going to be a cross-examination. Now, each one will get a chance to comment on the comments of the others, especially those that had a contrary view to their own. We'll go around the horn with that again. They'll have one uninterrupted minute. And then we'll come back to a summary and a rebuttal. Each of our guests will have a chance to summarize his statement, respond one last time to what the others have said. Now, I have an alarm here that's going to go off at the end of 1 minute. If they don't stop, then that's also why I have my faithful K-bar. We'll make sure that they stop. So we're going to get this ready to go, and I'm going to introduce the topic for you. The topic for today, we're just about ready to start a new Congress. In fact, you'll be seeing this after the Congress has already been installed. As you know, back in November 2014, we had a very important midterm election. The major issue in that seemed to be whether or not the Republican Party would be able to take control of the Senate and retain control of the House of Representatives. Well, they did, in a rather spectacular fashion, in fact. Republicans rejoiced, the Democrats were despondent. A number of people saw this as the beginning of a new era. Others, however, even friends of the Republican Party, cautioned that things might not be so rosy. After all, there's still a very liberal Democrat sitting in the Oval Office. And he has the constitutional power to veto a lot of their actions, and he has also demonstrated his unconstitutional powers of using the executive order to pass legislation of his own. So just how effective will the Republican Party be in dealing with this kind of a president, even though they have control of both the House and the Senate? Well, that's what everybody's been talking about. We here at Revolution Radio want to take that to the next level. Our question is not whether or not the Republican Party is going to be effective under these situations. Our question is this: just how effective can we expect the Republicans and the Democrats to be, period? There are a lot of people out there who have grown very discontent with the way politics are working out in the United States. And a lot of that discontent is being focused on the way the Republican Party machines and the Democratic Party machines have been handling things. So our question is this: can the American people trust the Republican and Democratic parties to fix the country? Gregory, we'll start with you. We'll get the timer going here. Start with yes, no, ready, go.
All right, well, the answer for me is no, and the reason is simply political parties are nothing more than a reflection of the people who are involved in them. And we live in a world where far too many people aren't even paying attention to politics or involved in politics. And at the end of the day, whether it's the Republican Party or the Democrat Party or even a third party, all parties are merely a reflection of the people who take the time and effort to be involved in their management. So at the end of the day, we cannot blindly put faith that they will not do what they want to do first and save America instead. So to me, it's more of a question of, will the American people save their parties and save America in the process?
Okay, thank you. We still have a little bit of time left, so we will cancel this and get started. All right, Scott, your position.
I'm going to agree with Greg, no, but I would also put with that, the question to start in some ways is a bad premise. My question would be, could the Republicans and Democrats be trusted, but could any political party be trusted? Whether it's Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Christian Patriot, Tea Party. We see in our history, and we see currently in American politics, every party that becomes an established party becomes corrupt. And like Greg said, that the people are lazy. Most Americans are lazy. They're uninformed, they're uneducated. They don't hold their elected people accountable for what they've campaigned on. And so we can see in the National Tea Party, they've already started to splinter. Locally, you've only got the Republican or Democratic Party to work with to make changes, because we can't even seem to get anybody to run for school board who's not a Republican or Democrat. So this idea of a third party candidate coming to save the day, or a third party, I don't find it working in our ignorant society.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Tony, your view.
I don't think that
Yes or no?
the political parties will not.
Well, did you say yes or no? Can the American people
No.
trust? Okay, no. Thank you.
No, thank you, Lawrence. I don't believe that the American people can trust the political parties are going to pull us out of any mess. They've spent the last 100 years piling bad legislation upon bad legislation. And the result is more for those that want to control and less for those that are trying to survive. And basically, we have a big divide in America. I think that to Greg's idea that people need to support their political parties is a fallacy. I think that people need to stand up for their rights and stand up for the form of government that was established in America. And it has nothing to do with political parties. Our founders argued against parties for the very reason that we find ourselves in today between parties.
Well, gentlemen, thank you. This is a little bit of a surprise. I would have to admit, I thought we would have some yes votes in here, since we have some representatives of one of the establishment parties. We have all no's, which is going to kind of limit some of the discussion here in round two in the cross-examination. So let me broaden this a little bit. Again, we don't decide what people are going to say. We open up the opportunity. We say, bring in whatever you want. We don't edit that or pre-screen their answers. Well, let me just broaden that a little bit in this next phase. If you want to comment on anything that anybody else has said, we'd like to encourage you to do that. But maybe you can also say now, if these political parties are not the answer, what is? Some of you have talked about that a little bit, but what do you think is the answer? So, Gregory.
Well, as someone who's worked within the party, part of my involvement, Lawrence, in the party is to enact the change I want to see. And I have to disagree, actually, with Tony. I mean, our founding fathers, while they preached against not having political parties, but what were the first things they did, with the exception of George Washington? They pretty much formed political parties. You have to have an established network in order, especially in the largeness of our country these days, to actually be successful. The real question is, are the American people actively involved in their form of political government? The answer is no. So at the end of the day, if the American people are either just not interested, or they just want to sit on their couch and watch programs like this and yell at the TV, but not actually do any of the work or sacrifice their time and their money to make sure that the vision of America they have is what is reflected in their parties. The same old people who are ruining our parties and ruining our government as a part of it will continue to move forward.
Okay. Scott?
I think I would have to agree along that line. The idea of working outside of a party, like Gregory said, the Federalists and Anti-Federalists were the first party even before we had a Constitution. They had already come up to parties, and while I don't like the bickering, I can't think of too many countries that have multiple parties that run a country very well. You have coalition governments fall apart as soon as somebody's elected. This idea of trying to run, like I said, we can't even seem to run a school board contest in San Bernardino by just a candidate saying, I'm going to run. I don't want any party help. I'm my own person. I'm just going to run for school board. I'm going to run for local city council. That's only a small ward, and I'm my own person. That just doesn't make anywhere. So you got to have the party establishment for the structure. But like Gregory said, if the people, the voters, the citizens are too lazy to get involved, it's going to become corrupt. And if we had some magic third party, all those corrupt people would move to the third party and take it over anyhow, like we're seeing in some of the Tea Party movement. Some of the same people that caused the problems have moved to Tea Party to cause problems.
Thank you. Tony?
Well, I think that to think that we don't need political parties may not be the right choice, for sure. We don't know. We were never given that opportunity. I don't think that people need to get behind a political party, because what we have today is a corporate oligarchy, and the parties are funded by big money, and they keep everyone else out. There's never going to be a third party introduced as president. They'll never get that far. They get quashed by the Democratic machine or the Republican machine. Why do we have to have parties? Why can't we just be Americans fighting to live free, with liberty, take care of each other, and be happy without a party title? That doesn't make any sense to me. I think that we can achieve a lot more without picking teams. I don't think that we need a magic third party. That's just a recipe for disaster. So if we can all agree on the form of government we should have and what rights and liberties we have, why can't we just live a happy life, a self-sustaining life, without offending or violating someone else's liberties or rights?
Okay, thank you. Well, this is the time for the rebuttal and summary. And there hasn't been too much to rebut. We have had a little bit of disagreement. We're pretty much in agreement so far. I haven't thrown in my 2 cents worth, but we've been in agreement pretty much so far that we can't trust the establishment parties as they exist today. The question is, do we need some other structure? Do we need to get more involved with those parties to straighten them out? Or do we need to get involved with no parties at all? So, summary. Gregory, if you'd start off.
Well, certainly, if you look at history, there's never been a republic form of government which didn't have some form of organized structure, whether you want to call it party or affiliations. At the end of the day, again, this is more of a reflection on where the American people are today. The whole reason why the parties have become what they have, and you brought up the whole point of corporations funding the political parties. Well, why have they been funding the political parties? Because the American people have stopped funding candidates like Scott. When he ran for Congress and I served as campaign manager, we had the hardest time getting everyday patriots to pony up money and time to help him fight for those, for their rights. So at the end of the day, as long as the American people would much rather watch TV, watch The Bachelor, or watch sports, and don't take an interest and are willing to sacrifice both their time and money, we can't trust the parties as they are today, because they're just a reflection of the few people, the few power-hungry people who are involved in running them.
So you get the government you deserve.
Exactly.
Scott.
That's your 2 cents worth. That was pretty good. And unfortunately, we quite often do get the government we deserve. And again, I agree with Gregory, and I hear Tony's point of view. But again, in something as big as America, 380 million people, how many million square miles, 50 states and territories. Like I said, you can't even get patriots to stand up and run for a school board election without the establishment of one party to the other side helping them. Successfully, I should say. But I can't even think, I've been in San Bernardino quite a while, and I can't remember the last time somebody locally ran as a non-party person for a race that's not even a partisan race. School board, city council in San Bernardino technically are not partisan. But there's nobody out there that wants to get out there and pony up, like Greg said, pony up to do it. So we need to have the establishment, but what we need is the American people to grow up and inform themselves and say, we are going to take that establishment and make it work the way we want to. Like you said, the corporations do it, but like Greg said, American people won't pony up. So if you're a candidate, you got to go to someplace for money.
Thank you. Tony?
I would agree with that premise if we weren't so far down this path of corruption, because we were a constitution that was supposed to be for the people, by the people. Does any of that sound familiar? So you're talking about citizen participation. Well, they're despondent and they're not partaking in politics because of the corruption. Because every time they vote, they can't get anywhere because we have a democratic form of voting that's 51%, which means the majority rules. And so the other 49 are upset and despondent. This is all party politics that has caused this divide. And then in terms of state sovereignty and individual liberty, we've given the federal government way too much power and authority. And so all we can do is vote for who we think is the best and who's going to win. But the American people, they're not stupid. They're not uneducated. They have common sense. But they have no ability to fight back with the system that's in place. They're not going to do it through their elected representatives when their representatives that they have as a choice beyond a state level are already hand-picked. And either way, the establishment's going to put whoever they want in office, regardless of the individual vote.
Gentlemen, thank you. A lot more agreement than I was actually anticipating. Now for my 2 cents worth. Now return that.
Hand me the knife, Scott.
The Republican Party last year, 2014, celebrated the 160th anniversary of its founding in Wisconsin back in 1854. The Democratic Party traces its roots back even farther. What that means is that both the Republican and the Democratic Party machines have had 150 years to run this nation, and they have run it into the ground. They're the political tag team that's responsible for the mess that we all behold out there, and they're offering us nothing new to fix it. They cannot be trusted. So my answer is an absolute no. Political parties are dangerous. Now, what do we do about that? Yes, some type of organization is necessary. But think about it. If we outlawed such terms as Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, left, right, what would candidates talk about? They talk about what they believe in and what they would do. Exactly what they should be talking about and exactly how we should be evaluating them. And if we did things like that, if we didn't have these kind of organizations, every campaign, even national campaigns, would be a grassroots campaign. And that would get us to the real truth of the matter. And that would get us, I think, a lot farther toward fixing our country. Anyway, just my 2 cents worth. Well, now we're going to go on to the second element of the program, which is called the hot button issue. We have asked each of our guests to bring in an issue. No restrictions other than it generally needs to be of national interest. It can be political, it can be economic, social, moral, religious, educational, whatever. But something that's of importance to them. Something that matters to them, something they care about. We've asked them to come in, no other restrictions. I don't know what they're going to talk about. We're going to find out here in just a minute. We're going to start this time with Scott. He's going to have 1 uninterrupted minute to tell us what that issue is, why he thinks it's important, what he thinks should be done about it. Then we're going to have a cross-examination. So it's a little bit different format than before. Tony will respond to that. Then Gregory will respond to that. And they'll each say what they think about it, whether he's full of beans, I agree with you entirely, or somewhere in between. Then we'll go on to Tony. He'll say his, the other 2 guys will respond. Gregory, he'll say his, the other 2 guys will respond. And then we'll give everybody 1 last minute to summarize their remarks, and then I'll give my 2 cents worth. So, Scott, what is your issue? What do you think is important, something that we need to discuss, and maybe a little bit about that and what we can do about it?
You know, we only have 1 minute. Wow, I got an hour. I think mine is the double standards in the national media, which ties into the discussion here anyhow. American people are so uninformed because we don't see. In the Founding Father days, one town the size of San Bernardino might have 5 newspapers that would have all points of view so that the citizens could hear it all. In the double standards, for instance, just over the last week, Congressman Scalise from Louisiana, on this thought that back 12 years ago he supposedly might have given a speech to a group that might have been racist. Congressman Joe Baca, who I challenged 3 times, can speak to La Raza all he wants, and nobody says a thing. Okay? Congressman Joe Baca can go to NAACP and Jesse Jackson all he wants. So I have no idea this group that Scalise was part of, and not even part of, nobody said he's part of it, they just said he showed up in a room. But the fact the national media hounded him for that 12 years ago, when other candidates and people can go to racist organizations and not even be held accountable, that's a double standard among many others that we don't have time for in a minute.
Tony, double standard in the national media, what do you think?
Boy, Scott, I got to agree with you.
All right, it worked. I didn't know he worked.
We have a double standard, and we have a double standard, and it's used in another form of political correctness. And we see a lot of this as the Achilles heels of America today, I think, because we are being reversed as, you know, portrayed as a good person one day, and then the next day we're a bad person for the very same reason, or vice versa. And it makes absolutely no sense. We have rioters in the northern states here up in Ferguson, and they're tearing down local business stores, burning them, looting. This isn't peaceful protest, this is criminal activity. But the minute we speak out about criminal activity, you're a racist. So I take to heart what you said. I think that was a good point.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Gregory.
Well, I too also agree with Scott.
time for
We
office.
certainly do have an issue with double standards in the media, especially when it comes to the liberal progressive agenda and also the PC agenda as well. Now, certainly the rise of social media, things like what we're doing here today, that's starting to slowly chip away at it, but you know, unfortunately, to tie back to our original discussion, as long as the American people don't hunger and crave that non-double standard, it will continue to persist. Now, I do feel that we are slowly chipping away at it. You're slowly starting to see some of the cable news shows. Glenn Beck now has a fairly successful network, which is much more libertarian. So you're starting to see slow cracks in that armor. Things like the New York Times and other long-established double-siding, you know, newspaper entities are on the verge of bankruptcy. So slowly it's chipping away, but it'll be interesting to see if we will truly ever get past that or not.
Very good, thank you. All right, Tony, your hot button issue.
Well, where do we start? I'll tell you, I think there's too many issues to squeeze into a minute, but you know, one of the things that I hear among all of us who have some slightly different views and ideas about our form of government and how we should proceed is that the parties are failing us. They're letting us down one way or another. The citizens are letting us down one way or another. Now, we can point fingers at each other and say what the problem is, but quite frankly, I think that a democratic system is letting us down. And that's the underlying issue here, because we're being ruled by the majority that I spoke about earlier, rather than ruled by the rule of law that a republic is supposed to stand for. And whenever you can give the majority what they want, at some point they take your money, they take your house, and what do we do when they come for our children? Just because 51% say it's right doesn't mean that it's right. And so my hot button issue is, let's educate people about what a constitutional republic is, that it's not old, that it's not antiquated, that it just needs to be utilized properly. The question is, are we so far down the path that we can't do that?
Hey, your comment on his comment.
Okay, well, I agree and disagree at the same time. I have the utmost faith in the American people. I'm very optimistic that if the American people so choose to, we can return to what our founders intended. The real question is, will they choose to or not? As we had talked about, so many people are uneducated. I agree with you 100%. We don't teach civics. We don't teach government. You know, most people don't even know where to find the neighboring state on a map. How can we expect them to understand what our founders talked about? I've learned more myself on my own about what the founders truly meant than I ever learned in any classroom. And that's a really sad thing, because it used to be we actually not only taught them what our founders said, but we taught them about their lives. There's a really great book. It's called The Lives of the Signers of the Declaration of Independence. That used to be a textbook back in the 1840s. So education is a huge thing. I agree with you 100%. I just hope that the American people will have that hunger to finally move back towards constitutional government.
Okay, thank you.
Do I get a rebuttal to that?
You'll get a chance in a little bit.
All right.
Yes. But right now, but first, Scott, your comment about what Tony said.
Oh, I'm still being beat up on
You're
this.
still being yeah, it takes two, man. But I would agree, for the most part, what you said. I think that might have thrown Lawrence a loop here, that we're agreeing more than he thought we would when he tried to rig the setting here. But the question would be, though, are we too far gone? Because, again, is the cancer so bad you got to cut off the head and then the patient dies? And that could be the same thing politically. I'm glad you brought it back, because you kept using that word democratic process a lot when we're not a democracy. And I would challenge Greg. He had at least one teacher who taught him a little bit. But I know he's learned more since he had a teacher, me. But the idea was we're a constitutional republic. We're supposed to elect people to represent us. We don't all get to vote on it. And I mean, the Founding Fathers, in their parties, the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers, even talk about this idea, does the 51% rule, or how do we stop that? And so we need to get back to it, and like I said, hopefully it's not too far down the rabbit hole to save.
Okay, thank you. And now, Gregory, for your hot button issue.
Okay, well, I decided to focus on something related to our original topic. As we talked about, there's going to be a lot of focus on what the new Congress will or will not be doing. One thing which I think everybody should be paying attention to is that there will be an inter-party fight along the lines of whether or not in the upcoming budget the Republicans decide to tackle entitlement reform. When I worked for House of Representatives, about 70% of our federal budget is not discretionary spending, it's mandatory spending, which means you don't get to touch it without changing the programs themselves. And so the last time the Republicans tried to nibble away at entitlement reform with the Paul Ryan budget, the Democrats used it as a big hammer in the 2012 presidential election. In fact, Obama ran against the Ryan budget. So it'll be interesting for me to see whether the far right of the party will force the party to push it forward in this budget, or whether they will wait until 2016 in hopes of having a Republican elected president first.
Thank you. Scott, your comment on that.
I don't know how to rebut that one. That was too easy, Greg. But I would agree that inter-party fights, well, as we're seeing, we don't even know if Mr. Boehner will be Speaker of the House to present that here next week, later this week. But I would agree, most people don't realize, most citizens don't realize how much of the big government pie, when we talk about the taxes and we can't spend and our freedoms are taken, the political correctness, how much that is in law, and you're going to have to take a presidential, you're going to have to get both houses and a president to even try to chip away at so much of that. And so I'm hoping that there's enough pressure from the American people on the Republicans and some of the Democrats that are up for election here in 2 years, whether they're senators or congressmen, that they will realize that we do need entitlement reform. Because I was reading an article this week, the war on poverty has spent more money in the last 50 years than every war combined in American history from the Revolutionary on. So we spent more money in the last 50 years fighting poverty than every war from George Washington through the current reboot of Iraq. And everybody always talks about how all these wars drain our budget. Well, food stamps drains our budget more than wars. And last time I checked, that thing about all the people, number 4 in there is national defense. So that is a constitutional issue, is defending the country in times of war. That is a constitutional issue. So it'll be interesting to see if Congress, both parties, can get enough votes to force the president's hand to start shrinking that back some.
Thank you. And Tony, your response.
Well, I think that the premise of having to maintain a fight within the parties is the problem. I think that, yeah, there's going to be infighting, yeah, there's going to be issues, and there's always a struggle for one to get to the top. If we look back over the last 100 years, what have either party done for us? Barack Obama passed an executive order December 14th, 2014, just recently, and it was to confiscate property of those potentially involved in the Ukrainian crisis. What does that mean? Why is the executive authority getting involved in issues that have to do from the state level down to state sovereignty? The political parties have failed us over and over. We have that track record. It's time for something new. Are we too far gone? I don't know. What's it going to take? I don't know. But there's a lot of people speaking up. I disagree with your premise that the people are stupid. I don't know what I said that gave you the idea that people were uneducated and not capable. A lot of it's common sense, and there's a lot of people out there standing up to fight. Just in the last year alone, we went from about 130 militia groups to over 900 militia groups. In my opinion, that's the American people speaking.
Okay, thank you. Now you get your 1 minute to rebut or summarize your comments and what was said about your comments. So Scott, we'll start with you.
Well, I guess mine's pretty easy because they both agreed with it, but just this idea of the double standard in the media, anything, no matter what label you put on Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, progressive, just the fact that if we held all of our elected officials to the same standard. Now again, if we go back, you keep going back there, 100 years, go back to 200 years, the political campaigns of 1800 were 10 times more brutal than the campaigns of 2012, or 14 or 16 will be. The Founding Fathers, they took off the gloves. I mean, if you go back and look at the Jefferson and Adams fights, who were Founding Fathers, they were there from the beginning. Their fights were so bloody and brutal in their two parties and stuff. But both sides had a way to bring their points up because there's so many competing things. Everybody talks about, you got Fox on one side and you got the other 8 on the other side. The days when there was, 3 or 4 competing newspapers in the city or TV shows. So we need to get rid of that double standard and hold them all to the same standard.
Thank you. Tony?
The federal government had certain powers enumerated to them, and that was it. It was very limited. And our federal government has amassed so much power and put us in such a position that when we're out of food and water, we go to them for help. Something's wrong. And I think that with this executive order that was passed, and I didn't have one conservative Republican from Congress raise their hand, inform the states or any constituents that, hey, guys, be on the alert. Something's going on here. We're taking property without due process is a telltale sign of the failing party system. And that's just a small example of the failures that have occurred over the last 100 years under the system. And so I don't mean to beat you up, but obviously I'm against the party system, at least these two parties. Quite frankly, a third party isn't going to do it either. But I believe that if our elected representatives showed the vigilance and diligence in protecting the state sovereignty, which it evolves to protecting the liberty of the people at the national level, then we could get out of this mess. But until we elect people that are looking out for state sovereignty and individual liberty, they're working against us.
Thank you. Okay, Gregory, your summary.
Well, I have to take personal exception with you, Tony, because I never said the American people are stupid. You put those words in my mouth. I never said that. I said I have the utmost faith in the American people. If they choose to take back their government, they can, and it can be restored. So do not put words in my mouth that I never said, first of all. Now, as far as back to my hot button issue, certainly it's going to be an inter-party fight, as I mentioned. I'm not sure which side's going to prevail on that one. And that's why I'm kind of interested, because I want to see which side's actually going to win. Because on that one, do you put yourself out there knowing that the Democrats are going to use that against the next presidential nominee, or will you hold off and have that fight down the road? Now, obviously, as I mentioned, entitlements, 70% of the budget. We have to tackle it, and the longer we wait, the worse it's going to get. But will they make the tactical political choice to postpone that fight to prevent it from being used against the next presidential nominee? So thank you.
Well, gentlemen, thank you. You made my 2 cents worth very easy. I'm only going to throw in about 1 cent worth because I pretty much agree with the positions that you took on each of your hot button issues. Regarding the duplicity and double standards in the national media, absolutely true. If somebody on the left side says something that's outrageous or offensive, you don't even hear about it. Somebody on the right side says something that's even close or could possibly be spun to be represented as being outrageous or outlandish or something. Man, you don't hear anything but. So yes, we do need some fairness in there. Left, right, they both make their mistakes, they both have some points. But we need to have fair representation in the media. And that's one of the reasons for this program, is to give an opportunity for people to come up. I don't even know what they're going to say. Just come up and say it. As you saw, I thought it was a little more controversy than we did. On the need to educate regarding a constitutional republic, absolutely. People are so profoundly ignorant about the basis of this country. They talk about a democracy. The founders did not want democracy. In fact, they went to great lengths to make sure that we were not a democracy. They even used the word mobocracy to describe democracy. They know, and historical studies have shown, that democracies tend to commit suicide within about 200 to 250 years, and they did not want that for their republic. And regarding entitlement reforms, absolutely. In my book, Solutions Guidebook for Rebuilding America the Great, there's a chapter on this entitled This. And it talks about the need not only to reform entitlements, but in my view, to absolutely eliminate them. This is something that is not an essential function of government. This is something the government at the national level didn't even do for about the first almost 2/3 of our history. They didn't spend a penny on this, and now it's the dominant part of our budget. And it's one of the greatest ways that whoever is running the government uses to transfer wealth from the private sector to the public sector where they can control it. It's interesting, before he turned to the dark side, Alan Greenspan, a former chairman of the Federal Reserve, wrote an article back in the late 60s, I think it was 1968, and it had to do with basing the economy and the monetary system on a commodity system like precious metals. And he made a remark in there that deficit spending is simply a means for the confiscation of wealth. Well, think about it. Who creates the wealth? We do. Wealth is goods and services. And the people in the private sector, workers like you, like us, we create that wealth. Well, if they're confiscating it, they're taking it from us. And entitlement programs has become one of the biggest vehicles to justify the confiscation of wealth so our politicians and bureaucrats can control it. Well, there's my 2 cents worth. Again, I'd like to thank our panel today, Gregory Young, Scott Folkins, Tony Burr. I think we had a wonderful discussion, and one that I wasn't quite expecting, but it's turned out very well. Thank you very much. We want to urge you to continue to tune in to the American Eagle Alliance on our website, AEA4USA. We will have more programs like this. We have ongoing issues. We have the Free Speech Zone. We have the Daily Bite. Lots of new stuff almost every day of the week, Monday through Friday. And then on Saturday and Sunday, you'll get a summary of what we had out there. So tune in, stay tuned, and follow along what we're talking about. We also have a lot of ways that you can help out to fight the Second American Revolution. And as you will see as you continue to watch these programs, it is our belief here at the American Eagle Alliance that that's exactly what we need, the Second American Revolution. And if you'd like to find out more about that, contact us at 909-913-7878. Again, 909-913-7878. We'll show you a plan to fight and win the Second American Revolution in less time than it took to win the first, without taking over the White House, the Congress, the Supreme Court, or any constitutional amendments. In 1776, we the people rocked the world. It's time to do it again. Thank you for listening. Check back with us. Now, let's get cracking, patriots. We got a country to save. Thank you.